Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, we got a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs and their goaltending and the last couple of games over this past weekend involving the Boston Bruins and the Carolina Hurricanes. Before we jump into the video, if you're new here or you've watched a couple of these videos already and you're enjoying them and you're not already subscribed, it would mean a lot to me if you would consider doing so. I'm trying to hit 8,000 before the new year. And it all starts when the Maple Leafs placed Nick Aube-Kubel on waivers on Friday, and then Saturday morning, he was claimed by the Washington Capitals. Because when the Maple Leafs placed Aube-Kubel on waivers on Friday, they were sitting at the 50 out of 50 professional contract limit. And then when he was claimed on Saturday, that opened up a spot. And that was very important because Matt Murray and Joseph Woll are currently out with injuries, meaning that the only other healthy goaltenders that the Maple Leafs have signed to an NHL contract in their organization is a guy playing in Sweden that they drafted last season. There are guys like Dylan Ferguson and Keith Petruzzelli and Dryden McKay who are in the organization, but those guys are only signed to AHL deals. They're not NHL deals, which means that the Maple Leafs can't call them up without signing them to a contract. So if the Capitals did not claim Aube-Kubel on waivers, I don't even want to talk about that. I don't even want to talk about that. It was a no-brainer for the Maple Leafs to give Keith Petruzzelli an NHL deal anyway. It was sort of surprising that he had signed an American Hockey League deal in the first place when the Maple Leafs first acquired him as a college free agent, but he's 23 years old. He's 6'5" or 6'6", depending on what website you look at, and he's a former third-round pick of the Detroit Red Wings from 2017. And if you're looking at his numbers over the last couple of years, he spent the majority of last season playing in the ECHL for the Newfoundland Growlers, and the Maple Leafs do that on purpose. It's not that he was bad, so he played in the ECHL. They played him there because they had guys in front of him on the depth chart, and they wanted him to get more starts. It's more valuable for him to have been a starter in that league than a backup in the American Hockey League. When he did play for the Marlies last season, he had a .902 save percentage. But to start this season, in 6 games, he was 6-0 with a .922 save percentage. So he was playing very well for the Marlies to start this year. And like we said, he's a former third-round pick of the Red Wings from 2017. The Maple Leafs signed him as a college free agent, and at the time, it wasn't an insignificant signing. He was actually one of the top goalie prospects available at the time, and in his draft year, he was one of the higher-ranked North American goaltenders available. So yeah, maybe the circumstances aren't the most ideal for him to make his NHL debut, but he probably will get an opportunity to play sometime this week, because it looks like Ilya Samsonov is going to be out for more than just the 7-day minimum that is required when you're placed on injured reserve. And Sheldon Keefe did also note that Matt Murray's return is on the horizon, that he's been progressing well coming back from his injury. He's on the timetable that they about expected, in that they shouldn't have to run with a tandem of Eric Källgren and Keith Petruzzelli for very long. Now, some people got upset with Michael for the tweet that's on the screen right now, and he later clarified it in another tweet. I kind of thought it was just a big misunderstanding, but at the same time, I don't think he's wrong. When the Maple Leafs made the decision to trade for Matt Murray, or even sign Peter Mrazek, two goaltenders who have a lengthy list of an injury history, even going back to last year, they went into the season with Jack Campbell and Peter Mrazek, two goaltenders with a bit of an injury history, you're almost asking for your depth at that position to be tested. And I'm not saying that there was nothing to like about Peter Mrazek when the Maple Leafs first signed him, and I'm not saying that there's no reason to be optimistic about Matt Murray at this point in the year. That guy's only played 1 game. I'm willing to give him a chance. But when you acquire goalies who are prone to injuries, and now I'm not talking about the goalies, I'm talking about the general manager, you're putting a guy like Ilya Samsonov in a position where maybe he's not ready for that workload. He started the season as hot as anyone with a .921 save percentage in his first 8 games. But if you're looking at his career numbers to this point, his previous career high in games to last season was just 26. And then he plays 44 last year. And if you're looking at the breakdown in his numbers, from January onwards to the end of the season, the schedule got condensed. He was playing more games than he ever had at any point in his career, and his save percentage really suffered. You're not putting Samsonov in a position to succeed, and you're not putting the other goaltenders in your organization in a position to succeed either. And for a guy like Shalgren, who had an 8-4-1 record last season with an 888 save percentage, and then came into this year in his first 3 games posting a similar 875, but instead was 0-1-2, I'd be lying to you if I wasn't extremely nervous when he entered that Boston game, a 1-goal game in the third period. Overall, by the numbers and having watched the game, the Maple Leafs played very well against the Boston Bruins. But in that third period, the Bruins were trying to mount a bit of a comeback. They had a couple of power plays, and the Maple Leafs were able to hold on. Mark Giordano with a huge shot block with under 10 minutes to go. Erik Källgren came up with a couple of nice saves. But overall, at the end of the horn, he throws up his arms like in just relief that that was over, because they did it. They did it. I don't know if he thought that he could do it, but they did it. They won the game. And in looking over their lines from that game against the Boston Bruins, they did go with a defensive pairing of Morgan Rielly and Timothy Liljegren, just like we had predicted in the previous video. And I had said my reasoning there was to try to generate some more offense at 5-on-5. Because if we're looking at their numbers offensively with both Morgan Rielly and Timothy Liljegren on the ice from last season, they were awesome. And if you're looking at their numbers defensively with those two on the ice last season, not the greatest. But for a team that has been struggling to score at 5-on-5 so far to start this season, well worth the risk to reward factor. And they did generate offense when they were on the ice together in that game against the Bruins, but by the expected goals against, they were also the Maple Leafs' best defensive pairing in that one. So very encouraging from what we saw from those two guys in their first game. In terms of the Maple Leaf forwards, it was the John Tavares line that was driving the bus offensively. Even though Matthews had their only 2 goals in this one, that top line started the game well, but I felt like they faded as it went on, and then they were split up against the Carolina Hurricanes, so we'll talk about that in a minute or so, but Matthews has 5 goals in his last 6 games. He's starting to heat up. John Tavares started the year on an absolute heater. If both those guys can catch fire at the same time, the Maple Leafs are going to be a very dangerous team. Moving on to that game against the Carolina Hurricanes, the Maple Leafs really struggled to generate anything offensively in the early going, and then midway through the second period, Sheldon Keefe decided to split up Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. And this quote, the quote that's on the screen right now, is Sheldon Keefe saying why he didn't think it was time to split up Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, and it was from like last week. And when he did split them up, it was Kerfoot, Matthews, Nylander, and then Nick Robertson playing with John Tavares and Mitch Marner. And it wasn't anything amazing, it wasn't instant success, but it did lead to them scoring the 2-1 goal and then the 3-1 goal as well. The first one was a very nice play from Mitch Marner to keep the puck going, and he got it to John Tavares, who beats Frederik Andersen. And then the third one, the one that Nylander scored, was a ugly one. that was a real ugly goal. Ideally, long-term, you want Matthews and Marner playing together. I think they showed you why last season when Marner, led the NHL in scoring from, midway through January until the end of the year, and Matthews scored 60 goals. But as good as they are, they're not perfect. Every once in a while, if they're going through a stretch like they have been so far to start this year, yeah, split them up. But I still think the Maple Leafs prefer to load up rather than split up when they're looking for offense. And what I mean by that is we've seen them just throw all 4, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander on the ice together, along with Morgan Rielly when they've really needed to generate something. Overall, the Maple Leafs did get outplayed in this game, but I don't think it was because they played poor defensively. I thought that they played okay defensively, were well enough, and Källgren made the saves that he needed to. But to be able to squeak out a win here on the second half of a back-to-back when the Carolina Hurricanes were rested and you had Källgren in net who played the night before, I'll take the 2 points. I really don't care how they got those 2 points. I'll take those 2 points. I'm including this in the video because it's hilarious, right? Justin Holl, over his last 3 games, ever since being paired with TJ Brodie, has played quite well. And we talked about the decision to pair those 2 guys together in the previous video because Justin Holl's really struggled so far to start this year at getting the puck out of his own zone, and TJ Brodie's one of the best on the team at doing so. So you pair those 2 guys together, you simplify the game for Holl, and hopefully he figures out the other stuff. And so far it's worked. And you know what? On the first goal that the Leafs scored, it was the two least likely guys on the team who directly contributed to it. It was Justin Holl and Pierre Engvall maintaining offensive zone pressure, and then Calle Jarnkrok was able to fire it by Frederik Andersen. But that's just kind of the way that it works with Justin Holl, right? He lays an egg for like a week or two, and then he just puts it together overnight, and you just got to hope that you catch him on the upswing. It's an absolute roller coaster, and right now we're on the way up. I've shown this Bob McKenzie quote from last season like 2 or 3 times already so far to start this year, but apparently management had a conversation with the core players where they said, hey, why can you guys beat teams like Boston and Carolina, Florida and Tampa, and do it kind of convincingly, but when it comes time to playing teams like Buffalo and Montreal, you lose, and it's kind of miserable. And the core players pushed back and said, when we need to take care of business, we will. And to their credit, the Maple Leafs did have the best regular season record against playoff teams last season. They didn't win in the first round against the Lightning, but they were back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. They did make it to the finals 3 straight years in a row, and the only other team to push them to 7 games over that 3-year span were the Islanders. That's it, just the Leafs and the Islanders. So for that series that was literally separated by just 1 goal and 1 shot, I'm not going to say that they didn't show up, because they did, just the better team ended up winning. But then again, to start this season, they lose games to the Coyotes, the Sharks, the Ducks, who were in last place, mind you. But then they win games against the Bruins and the Hurricanes, and they kind of look good while doing it. I'm not going to say that they're doing this on purpose, because that would imply that they're playing poorly or losing on purpose, and I don't want to say that. But the more times that we see it happen, I don't know. If we're taking a look at what's next on the schedule, they have the league-leading Vegas Golden Knights at home on Tuesday night, and then they play a back-to-back scenario with the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Vancouver Canucks at home. And I would assume that Keith Petruzzelli gets one of those games. I'm just not sure which one, because the Saturday night game against the Canucks is probably the easier matchup, but then again, it is hockey night in Canada, so I don't know, but it would be very on brand for the Maple Leafs to beat the Golden Knights tomorrow night, to beat the Penguins on Friday, and then lose in a miserable effort Saturday night to a Canucks team that has greatly struggled so far this year. I don't know. What do you guys think? As always, make sure to let me know what your thoughts and opinions are down in the comments section below. Make sure to like the video if you did like it, and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, I'll see you in the next one.